can't thank you enough for listening to this show and being part of this community. If you've listened in the past, you've likely heard me say that the reason I created this podcast is to normalize the conversation around imposter syndrome. There has been some great discussion about imposter syndrome lately, particularly around the ways in which the imposter syndrome label pathologizes the individual and lets the system off the hook. I could not agree more. But I also come from a strong bias towards self-empowerment. Regardless of the forces that have led us to imposter syndrome, and it differs based on factors such as race, gender, cultural upbringing, etc. These feelings are real and they're very disruptive. So, while we absolutely need to focus on structural change as it relates to systemic bias, inclusion, and psychological safety, in the meantime, we can also empower ourselves to manage imposter syndrome and other confidence challenges. My goal here is to share the stories of successful people who have experienced self-doubt and have learned how to navigate it more effectively. I hope these stories will make you feel less alone in your journey and will inspire you to embrace your strengths more powerfully. Please help us expand the reach of these stories by subscribing and/or leaving a 5-star review. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome, Paz. I am so excited to talk to you today, and I'd love to start by just asking you to introduce yourself.
Hello, Kim. Thank you for having me. I guess first and foremost, I am a mom and a wife and a sister, and I was a daughter, and a writer. Written several books now, and I'm in the middle of narrating a couple of books for myself. And I mean, that's about it. I'm an entrepreneur because I'm an indie publisher, and I've done a lot of work in the past as far as sales, owning businesses, running things, just kind of doing what you need to do to live your life. Never really gave myself a title until now that I'm an author. And that's kind of something I have trouble with.
I'd love to dive into that a little bit more as we talk about this. Before we go into imposter syndrome more specifically, what do you write about?
Well, my first book was 4 years ago, and it's a memoir. And I had lost my mother recently, and I wasn't grieving well. And I decided that I needed to tell their story. It was kind of cathartic to write about my parents, my upbringing, what they went through as immigrants, my father having been separated from his family in Cuba for a long time. So memoirs is something that's very close to my heart. I also write fiction, but it seems I write things that are close to my heart again. My next 2 books, it's a series, are about a young man with autism. And I have a younger brother. He's 48 now. I keep thinking he's 45. He's 48 now, and he's been living with Asperger's syndrome for 45 years, and he didn't find out until just about 4 years ago. So that was definitely interesting, and it really inspired me to write about someone who has Asperger and can function and live a normal life. Just they need a little help along the way. Or sometimes you have to kind of ignore it, and not ignore it, but just understand and accept that that's who they are. So mostly that's what I write about. I love fiction. I love historical fiction, and the memoirs, writing about families. One of my upcoming projects after all this COVID is over, I have a stack of letters coming to me from Cuba, which were the letters that my father wrote to his uncle, his brothers, and parents. And so I'll be compiling a book of letters. And I think it's going to be in Spanish, but I may do it in English. We'll see. I'm mostly, and I consider myself an American writer, but I have now taken my first and second book and turned it into, I'm narrating it into Spanish. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what imposter syndrome means to you.
Well, to be honest, I never heard the word until I was doing some research online on podcasts, and I came across your podcast. So I listened to some, and I was just sitting at my laptop with my mouth open. Like, I was just in shock, because I always felt like I was getting away with something. Like, I felt like a phony, no matter what I've done. For instance, my husband introduced me to somebody, about a year ago, and they asked what I did. And I thought he would just say, oh, we work together, or we've done businesses together. But he said, oh, my wife is an author. And I said to him, I'm not an author. And he says, do you not write and publish? I'm like, yes. And he said, so what is the problem? I said, I don't know. I just don't I feel like I'm getting away with something. And it is the strangest thing. And it's happened to me in the past, when I have done other jobs, like even back when I was in college and I had gotten an internship at the United Nations. I was like 19, 20 years old. And even doing that, I remember walking around the UN and going to these meetings to do translations and thinking, oh my God, they're going to find out that I'm a phony. And I don't know why I felt that way. I was obviously there because I was recommended and I had earned my way there, but I still felt like a phony. And I can't explain why, but I felt like I was an imposter. Have you ever seen a movie with Val Kilmer called, I can't think of the name of it, The Saint, where he goes around and he wears different kinds of costumes, and he becomes different characters. And so he fools the world. He fools everybody in what he does. And I feel like that. And I have always felt like that, even since I was itty bitty. And looking back after I saw your show and listened in on your show, I realized, wow, that has been me so many times over. And I don't know why. So.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel kind of crazy. And it's almost like an inner struggle, I think, to feel that way. I spend hours. I spend all day writing. I spend all day, editing or narrating or doing something for somebody else who needs a narrator for their podcast, like poems to be read. And I do it, and when I get done, and then it gets posted, and I'm like, oh, I got away with it. That's how I feel, and that's a crazy thing. It's really a crazy thing. So yeah.
Well,
is that like maybe a little out of is that normal? Like,
you are absolutely on target with exactly what you're saying. That's crazy. Exactly how those of us who struggle with imposter syndrome feel. That sense of I'm about to be found out, right? Somebody's going to figure out that I don't belong here. I don't actually deserve this. And I really appreciate your openness about that and your vulnerability and how you talk about it, because that's exactly what I'm hoping to achieve through these conversations. So many people, especially women, are feeling this feeling not only in and of itself, but then this shame on top of it of like, there's something wrong with me for feeling this way. And it kind of just builds on itself. Right. But the reality is many, many, many of us feel this way from time to time. And there's a lot of different reasons why we feel that way. I mean, one of the primary triggers is doing something new, doing something that's outside of our comfort zone. Maybe it's a skill we've never used before. It's working with people we've never worked with before. Right. It just makes us really intimidated, really nervous. Also, if we feel different from the people around us. So if you're the only woman, if you're surrounded by other people who all seem to be the same and you're different, then there's this tendency to look inward and say, what's wrong with me? Right? Why am I not more like them?
Yes. And I grew up feeling like that. I'm not just, part of it was cultural, because my parents had different expectations of us. And I did everything the opposite of what my mom wanted me to do. Like, our parents thought that, at least in our culture, my mother's Dominican and my dad was Cuban, that a young lady, she graduates school, she finds a young man, and she gets married, or she gets a job, like as a secretary, as something, you don't go off to college. So the first thing I did was, when I was a senior, was I applied. I lived in New Jersey. That's where I was born and raised. I applied to schools in Arizona. I applied to schools in, California. I did Princeton, but of course, I didn't want to stay in New Jersey. I wound up going to Berkeley, to California, for my first year. And so I think a lot of it had to do with my parents and them saying, you can't do this because you are poor, because you're Hispanic, because you won't be accepted. And I always felt different as it was, because I was different. My friends they weren't really friends, but people were hanging out, being cheerleaders, doing things like that. And I wanted to play volleyball or stickball with my brother. I preferred to sit in my room and read. So I felt already that I was different, but only because I wanted to be. That's just who I was. I wasn't like, cheer. Like, I don't cheer if I go to a game. I'm quiet. I talk, and I like to talk. But even as I wrote my memoir, I realized that as a young girl, I had this issue. And someone told me, one of my fans wrote and said, I feel so sorry for you. I felt so bad when you were little. You always put yourself down. And I would call myself stupid. And I looked at my book, and I refer to myself as, I was such a stupid teenager, or I was so dumb, or I made such stupid decisions. And I think that's all kind of part of the same thing. At least that's my observation. And I've made those observations once I found out about your show, because I started to really dig deep, and why do I feel like this? So anyway.
And you hit on another couple of the triggers too, when you talked about doing something different from what your parents expected, because that's definitely a trigger as well. So if you go down a different path, there's this internal sense, it might be subconscious or conscious, that I'm disappointing my parents. Right. I'm not honoring their expectations of me, and then doing something for the first time. So if you're the first one to go to college, if you're the first one to go down a certain path, you don't have role models. You don't have that sense of having marinated in that environment before, right? So you look around and you see people that are legacy students, their parents went there, everyone in their family did, and here you are feeling like, this is a whole new world for me and I don't fit in.
Right. And my older sister got to go to college, but she was from my dad's first marriage, and her stepfather, he did well. So he paid for her schooling. At first it was an issue, her wanting to go to college, but she went to an all-girls school, and it had to be, I think it was a Catholic college in Pennsylvania, and she couldn't go too far. There was parameters, but she was able to break the mold, and she did it before me. So I remember when she left, I was devastated. I was like, oh my God, she's abandoned us. Now what? And that's true. It was like just breaking away and doing something different. And in the intro, it's funny because when I was narrating last night, in the intro of my book, I talk about that, because I reflect and I say how I had been walking through a bookstore a few weeks after my mom passed away, looking for something that I could relate to, because I was just so lost and so in so much pain, and I felt abandoned. I felt orphaned. It was horrible, what you go through when you're grieving. And I couldn't find what I was looking for. I couldn't find it. And in my head, I could hear my mother. I could hear her say, there's nothing missing in your life. You're a mother, you're a wife, a mother, and you have a home to take care of, in that order. And I could hear her telling me, stop looking, go home, I don't know, mop the floor, make dinner. But no. And then I realized the book I wanted, the book I was looking for, had to be written, and it had to be written by me. And I had always written, but I had never published. And that's what got me started. And even though I wrote this book and they're on the cover, and I honor my parents and I talk about them, and I was just featured in a magazine where I talk about honoring my parents and their legacies and everything that they taught us, I still feel like, oh, my mom is looking down and she's shaking her finger at me like, shame on you. It's crazy. It really is crazy, because I'd hope she'd be proud, but she might be like, it's not your job. That's not something you should be doing. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. She's not here to tell me, oh, I'm proud of you, or oh, you're just being crazy as usual,
Yeah.
rebellious.
Yeah. And so what's when you talk about the fact that she's not here to tell you that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, what it allows is for you to recognize that that voice that you're hearing is not necessarily hers or not necessarily real.
Of course, I know that, but I know what she would say.
Mm.
But I know what she would have said, at least back then, if I said, I feel empty. I feel like there's something missing, that there's something I should be doing. And a lot of that is quite personal and quite just an integral part of finding myself and who I am. And at my age, like, I wanted to finally do something. Like, I had always been writing and thinking and reading and journaling, and someone people would say, oh, you should be a writer, you're such a good writer. I would write stuff for people, and I never did anything for myself. And when I did was on the heels of, the loss of my mom. And even actually when my dad died, his doctor, who eventually left the medicine field to be a writer for musicians. He was a composer, which is really funny because you go through medical school, you're a doctor, and then you just leave it to go sing or write for Broadway, which is what he does. He knew that I wrote, and he always taught me journaling. And so I had given him some notes, and they took it to a conference in New York City to talk about my dad's illness. But even then, afterwards, he was like, I would like to see everything you wrote. And I never let him see it. I never showed it to him because I felt that when he read it, he would see that I was not a writer, that I was a fake. And I even told him that. I said, I just don't feel comfortable. You're going to see this stuff and you're going to be disappointed. And when you read it, he was like, what you wrote helped the medical conference explain the process, because you watched your father. I left Berkeley to help my mom, to watch your father through all these stages, and there are things that had never been documented. So medically, what you're doing is helping. And I was still no, and I never did show him. And when I got so sick of him calling me and asking me, that I took all those journals and all my notes and I just shredded them to pieces and I threw them away because I didn't want that pressure on me. And it's so silly. Now I wish I had them, and I wish I had his phone number and I could go, hey, guess what I did? But I can't, I don't know. It was strange, but he always told me, you really should concentrate on writing. And I was like, I can't. I have to work. I have to go to school. I have to help my mom at the hospital. I don't have time for me. I have to do this. So I think all of that, it's almost like a guilt too. My mother was very good at guilt, and I think I do it too as a mom, of just telling someone, you should be doing this for me and not that for you. I think that's what part of it comes in too. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, though I have been told by a psychiatrist that before, that I've lived my life and many times for other people and never for myself. So, yeah. So that's just something that's always followed me around. And I think about it all the time. I wake up in the middle of the night, or I'm reviewing a book for someone, and I think, who am I to tell this person or to judge their book, their work? Like, who am I? Like, what gives me the authority?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You absolutely are here saying a lot of what so many of us are feeling. And what's interesting to me is the relationship between imposter syndrome and fear. So there's just this very primitive response that we have to doing anything new, to doing anything that goes against the people we care about, right? That this fear response kicks in and it triggers that voice that says, who are you? You have no business doing this, right? You're going to fail. And all of those statements, however harsh they are are really rooted in fear and safety. It's like don't go out there because it's dangerous. Stay where you are and protect yourself. And I think that's a lot of where like the complicated relationships with our parents come from too, right? Like, because I didn't know your mom, and I don't know your relationship other than what you've shared, but a reinterpretation of what you're talking about might be that she was really afraid that if you stepped outside of the traditional mold, that something bad would happen, right? And she was trying to protect you. Or she had her own fears. And maybe there was a part of her that wished that she could have done more of what you did. And watching you do it triggered something in her too, right? And so it's so complicated. But what strikes me is that throughout all of this that you're talking about, shredding your journals and not sharing them, is you're a writer now. You're actually publishing your writing. Right? How does it feel to now be doing that?
I try not to feel. Try not to think too much. I think too much. So I'm so busy that I'm writing and I'm promoting and I'm narrating and I'm my husband is a voice talent and I'm kind of trying to help him and trying to learn because I think it's something I could do as well. But then at the same time, I just feel, okay, it's best I just do what I need to do. So I just kind of like push through my day. I don't think about it, because if I think about it, it's funny, because one of the main things an author or writer thinks about, even I would say someone who writes music, is block, like a writer's block. I don't have writer's block. I've never have. Things just flow out of me. I feel like I will implode if I don't write. It's almost like some people who love to sing or dance, like they feel like if they can't do that and they're not free in their movements and use those talents, those physical talents, that they can't breathe, they can't live. And I feel that way with words. So I try not to think about it. But if I sit and I really like start looking at something, I start looking at one of my books and wondering, oh, what are my fans going to say? What is, whoever going to say? Then it comes in, and it's not a fear. It's, I just feel like I'm in a little hidey hole and they're going to find me. It's the weirdest thing. It's,
it's just so it sounds like in some ways that's been a strategy for you, is to just not get caught up in thinking about it, right? To just do it because it drives you and you need to do it, but not get tangled up in all of the
I have to. It's because I have to. It's like if you watch baseball, you know how when a runner goes to first base, well, the guy who just hit the ball, he has to run to first base, and the one in first base has to run to second base. Otherwise, no one's going to go around the diamond, and no one's going to make score a home run. And so it's that, because he has to. And so I have to do it. Regardless of how I feel about it, I have to do it. I have to. It makes me feel not even a sense of accomplishment, because I don't feel that way. I don't take things and like wear them like a badge. A lot of people I'll talk to, and let's say I'm on social media a lot now because I have to. And I was off Facebook for like 3 years or something. And my sisters and my nieces were like, why aren't you on? Do you miss this? Do you miss that? And I was like, people are going to look at my picture. I'm going to post pictures of what am I going to tell them? Like, who cares what I do in my life? That's just me. I'm pretty private that way. But now I go and I'll post a picture of myself and I post my book and I tell them what I'm doing. And so I do it because I have to, not because I want to. And it's just a strange way to feel. I don't let it stop me. But if I sit, like now when we finish talking, if I go sit in a corner somewhere and I start thinking about this, it'll consume me. I'll be like, oh my gosh, maybe she picked up on it too. And maybe I shouldn't be writing. And I just think about all the things, just like back in school and, education. And should I should I have, gone on and gotten a master's and a PhD? Will that make me feel different, less of an imposter? Having a PhD, will that make me feel less of an imposter? And I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, it's just so ingrained in me and who I am since I was small that I think it's just going to be there, and it's just something I've learned to deal with without really even knowing what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I'm sorry, I just remembered this. I had a discussion with a friend of mine years ago. Oh, probably about 10, 15 years ago. Well, we were in the travel industry together. She got me into it when I moved to the state of Florida way before I met my husband. This is back in the 90s. And she's very successful at what she does right now. She's a director of something for Disney. She has been everywhere. Very, very successful at in the travel industry. One of those people that knows thousands and thousands of people, and she can tell you who they all are, what their names are, where they're from. And I've never been that kind of, oh, I know this and I know that. So we're talking one day, and I told her, Lily, I kind of feel like a phony. I feel like no one's caught on to me, but like when I remember, I think I was trying to get some kind of job, and I asked for a reference, and she was like, oh my God, you'll be great. You'll get the job. And I did get the job. But she said to me, I'm going to tell you something. I feel the same way. And I'm like, no way. How could you feel the same way? I mean, you're so confident, and you are the head of this, and you've done that. But she feels the same way. And after she said it, she didn't say she was an imposter, but she said she felt like a phony and that she would be found out. And that is exactly what I always thought. So the word imposter syndrome didn't come into play, but it was years ago, and I always have that in the back of my mind. I always have that think about that conversation with my friend Lily, and think, okay, well, if Lily feels like that, then I'm not crazy.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example of why it's so helpful to talk to other people, because we do think we're the only ones. As soon as you find out all these people around you who seem like they've got it all figured out, right? They're confident, they're strong. Yes. And then they say, I feel that way too. Then we all can take a deep breath and realize, hey, this is not just me.
I was shocked. I mean, I was shocked because she's so confident, and she has so many friends. Like, she's one of my few close friends, and now she has a lot of friends. Like I'm one of her close friends, but she has like just thousands of people that she knows. They have a huge like people will come to their house and they entertain guests and they do stuff like that, and I don't do that. So we're different in that sense. That I'm different. But when she told me that, it really has never left me. And I think about it, and I'm like, even if she feels that way, then a lot of people must feel that way, but they don't say it. Mm-hmm. It's like when you go on a job interview. Like I would train some people to go on job interviews, and in our entrepreneur, in our businesses, I had to hire people, fire people, and do all that. And so I could really read people, and I could tell when someone was uncomfortable. I could tell when someone was lying to me, and when what they put on their application or resume wasn't real. I could tell because you speak, and the way you say things and how you talk about certain experiences, it kind of gives you a hint whether or not those experiences were real. So I was pretty good at hiring because of that. But when I went to a job interview, I felt like I wish he would turn around, or she, and the door was open and I could just run, because I felt like, oh my God, he's going to find out. And then I think, what is he going to find out? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. So,
and that's another strategy in and of itself, right? Is to actually look at what you're telling yourself and realize how crazy it is, and I don't mean crazy, but
yeah,
just the absurdity of what we tell ourselves, right? The fact that we truly believe these things about ourselves that we have no reason to believe. And so the more that you can actually, you say it out loud, you challenge those statements that we hear, recognize that they're coming from a place of fear. It's a well-intentioned response. It's just overactive and disruptive.
Right. Right. My husband says that over the years that I have talked myself out of certain things because of my deep-rooted belief. It's actually, poor self-esteem. I've had poor self-esteem, and I know I do since I was really young. So I've had to learn certain things. Like if someone gives me a compliment or they say, "Oh, I love that picture. You look beautiful," I would be like, "Thank you." Just so it's the same concept. And he said you can never take a compliment. You need to be gracious and just say thank you. And now I'll be like, thanks, but have you seen all this gray hair?
Yeah.
And someone recently said to me, you're so confident. I love that you're letting it grow, because it grows in the front, and it grows like, I kind of look like, well, my husband said it kind of looks like Elvira. So I'm like, because my hair's so black, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but I'm good with it. I look at it almost as something I've earned, as opposed to something I have to hide. Because until last year, I used to just dye the front, because the gray was coming out, and then I started to try to pluck it. That was a big mistake, because it just comes back, and it comes back. It seems like it comes back thicker and more. And so anyway, so I decided to let it go. So people think I'm confident because I'm letting my gray show. And it's not confidence. It's just accepting this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. In 5 years, I might be completely gray. I don't know. But the least, after my mom died, I realized how unimportant the way I looked should be. It shouldn't be the focus of how I feel about myself. I always compared myself to my younger sister or my older sister or my best friend, who was gorgeous and looked like a model. Or I did that. And, as you get older, you feel different about yourself. As we mature, as we go through our 30s and 40s and 50s, we all start to feel different. I just told you how old I am. I'm 52. But it's definitely something that I've always had to deal with. And I think a lot of with the imposter syndrome thing has to also do with your self-esteem. And not just physical. It's just a thing. I think they kind of go in. Have you experienced that, like with other people, that they have poor self-esteem? They may not act like they do, but they do.
Absolutely. I think we're all struggling with it at some level. And I think the challenge is that because nobody talks about it, we all make assumptions about other people and we really have no idea. Like you said about your friend, you would never have known that if you hadn't put it out there and given her a chance to say, I feel the same way.
Right.
I think it's helpful to remind ourselves that just because somebody else looks like they've got it all figured out doesn't mean they feel that way.
Right. They could be completely successful. And it also, if you look at celebrities and people who have committed suicide, or who, you hear a story.
Would never have expected.
Yeah. Exactly. But and then I think about, well, how could I never have expected that he would have committed suicide? Because I truly didn't know him, because he made me laugh so much. And it didn't mean that he wasn't feeling like an imposter. And I'm thinking specifically of Robin Williams, actually, who dealt with a depression. And my mother had chronic depression, very severe. And so those are things I fought growing up, because I said, I'm not going to be like her. I'm not going to be depressed. Then at the same time, I want to be like my mother, because I adored her and she was brilliant and she was just a very strong lady. But she really had borders. She had these things she put up around herself where she didn't think she could do this or that because she had an accent. And I didn't want to feel like that. I wanted to exude some sort of confidence so that my sons would be more positive and would say, hey, I'm going to try that. Hey, I'm going to do that. And not be like me and feel, I can't, because somebody will figure me out. And I think my youngest son has my issue. I think he feels that way. I think he feels like a phony. And it just in things that he says. Every now and then I'm like, oh, no. And he just turned 18 and he didn't want to have an 18th birthday. He was like, oh, I don't want to be 18, Mom. he think he's afraid of the world and growing up and all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, so I think it's been handed down. It's a something he picked up on. I think he really did, and I feel sad for that he picked up on my, I don't know, my insecurity, my hiding myself, because I didn't want people to know that I was possibly not real. Not, I don't know. It's hard to know because I'm not a psychiatrist, although I may sound like one. No, I'm kidding. I'm the last thing from a psychiatrist.
Well,
So,
but you're very self-reflective, and I really, really appreciate your telling your story so honestly. What motivated you to want to do that? What motivated you to want to talk to me and tell the story?
Well, I've been promoting my books, and I've been going on a lot of podcasts, and then I was just listening to podcasts, some of my favorite ones, and I did a search on I think it was depression and psychology or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, and Impostor Syndrome was the name of the show, or that was the title that I saw, and I just was shocked. And so I listened and I read about you, and I listened to a couple of shows, and I was like, oh my God, this is something I have to do. I hope that they'll want to talk to me. But I didn't want to do it to promote my book. Actually, I was telling my husband earlier, I said, I don't think I'm going to post this on Facebook and share with anybody or put it on my website. I felt like it was something that I wanted to do for me to see, because I always felt there's something wrong with me feeling this way. It can't be normal. And then I'll think about my friends and think, but she has it, or she feels that way. So, it's kind of like a struggle. And so when I saw what you do, it was like, I felt like I was, in the deep end, can't swim, and somebody threw out an arm and pulled me up out of the water. That's how I felt when I saw your show. I was like, something to finally kind of put at ease those feelings. It's that's the best way I could describe it. I just was curious, and I felt like I needed to know that this was real, because it's real to me. So, and I'm not promoting my book here, obviously, more so showing my weaknesses. And in my book, I did that because I wrote a memoir. So everybody now knows all the little things I never told my mother. But it's been great because people are like, oh my God, your book. I felt like that happened to me. My mom was like that. My dad said that, we grew up in the same town. I can't believe that you felt the way I did. And so that's been great. So doing this, I was thinking too, well, maybe someone else who is stuck and won't proceed with whatever their dream is, maybe they'll do it if they hear me or they hear someone else on the show, because I'm going to leave this world one day. And if I help one person, that was my whole purpose of being here. So that was the other reason I wanted to let someone like me know that they have value, and that they have something they want to do. They should do it regardless of what they're telling themselves all the time, because we are our worst enemy sometimes, especially women. We really can put ourselves down. So, and no matter how many times my husband tells me I'm brilliant and he loves what I wrote, or he tells me I'm beautiful, I'm just like, you say that because you're biased. It's what I tell him, which is horrible. I should just say, thank you, sweetie. I love you too, or you're beautiful too. But I say you just say that because you're biased,
Oh, I know that so many people listening are going to be nodding their heads at so many of the things that you said. I am so grateful to have had a chance to talk to you today, to hear your story. And I know that a lot of people are going to benefit from it.
Thank you. Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Do you have the same issue?
Absolutely. And
Really?
that is why I do this, because it has been so much of a personal struggle for me that as I've been on my own journey to manage it, I feel just like you. Every time I learn something new, every time I find a new way to manage it, I feel this sense of opportunity to share that with other people so that they might have a slightly less painful experience.
Wow. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I didn't look to see how many listeners you have or anything like that, but I think everybody should listen to you. I don't know, how could I help you promote?
Oh, thank you.
But I think that there's so many people that feel that way. There has to be a way for you to get up there and you're like on the top of the charts, because there's so many people that are hold themselves back. And I know that I have held myself back many times in many facets of my life. Even when I was I am a photographer. See, I'm doing it there again. But someone recommended me to do their wedding photography, and I hadn't done a wedding. So, but anyway, this girl, she brought this woman over, and her photographer ran off with her money. So I showed her my portfolio, and she was like, "Oh, you're hired." I was like, I've never done a wedding. And she's like, "But you're a photographer and your work is beautiful." Well, but you don't understand. I'm not a wedding photographer. And she was like, the person that was hiring me was trying to convince me that I was a photographer. I'll never forget it. And of course, after that, I did a lot more weddings, and I do a lot of portraits and stuff. I've since then kind of put that aside a little bit because of my writing, but I did the same thing then. And I know that there's a lot of girls out there, young women, teenagers, women in their 20s and their 30s, which are the ages when we're really trying to establish who we are. Because and it's true, I mean, if you talk to women in different stages of their lives, when you're 20 and 30, you think you have it figured out. Like you kind of feel like, I'm at the prime. I'm at the top of the game. Like these are the best years of my life. And to be honest with you, my 50s, I've just started them. I wish I felt the way I do now when I was 18, 19, 20, 25. Mm-hmm. And not because of the knowledge and experience, but because just life in general, it kind of teaches you lessons. Horrible things you will go through will be a gift one day. And I have a couple of autoimmune illnesses that have played games with me and made my life difficult, but I refuse to let them stop me. And so what you're doing is, to me, just a gift. I hope that you can find a way to reach out to all ages, especially younger women, because I think you could really help a lot of people.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me.
Well, you're welcome.
As we wrap up today, I want to share some additional resources to help you stay connected and continue to build your confidence. Please check the show notes for links to my free weekly discussion group, where we informally chat about common challenges and experiences facing women in the workplace. It's open to women of all backgrounds, functions, levels. It's just a very safe and comfortable place for all of us to come together to support one another. You can also check out our Facebook and Slack communities to connect with, support, and learn from other women on similar journeys. And last but not least, contact me directly to schedule a free 30-minute call to explore your challenges and see if my team can help you more quickly achieve your goals. I am now super excited to share an announcement from my new friend and colleague, Rebecca Heiss, about a powerful program she is launching to support women. Check the show notes for additional information on this program too. Thank you.
Welcome to The Leap. This is a welcoming, inclusive network of ongoing development and education for professional women. I'm Dr. Rebecca Heiss, CEO and founder of The Leap. The Leap was created to ensure high-potential women have access to a group coaching and professional development model for life. At The Leap, you'll be part of a community of women built on the principle that we are strong as individuals and unstoppable together. The Leap works by bringing together women in small cohorts. Think you and your soon-to-be 12 best friends and confidants for accountability, personal and professional development, and networking. In addition to their cohort, members will have access to the full community of The Leap. Together, we navigate content from leading researchers to help us overcome stress and anxiety, imposter syndrome, fear of rejection, and much more. We hope you'll join us in making The Leap yourself.